Good evening, everyone. We are now in chapter 32 of the book of Deuteronomy. As we begin chapter 32, it is actually a very different profile, very different from how we have read Deuteronomy for all the chapters that we have spent time on. And the reason is that it is now at a time where all the instructions have been delivered to Moses, and Moses would have written it all down, and he would have passed it to the Levites, and the Levites would have placed it next to the Ark of the Covenant and in the care of the Levites. And now, coming to chapter 32, we have a different profile that God is speaking. No longer instructions, but very much warnings, reminders, and it's somewhat prophetic about the future. And so chapter 32 is fairly long, and we'll probably break it into two as we deal with it today. Let us look at a couple of words here as we begin in verse 1. And it says here, give ear. And the word give ear really is literal. In fact, this is one of those rare occasions that in this case, we have the New King James on the screen, that the New King James is actually giving the translation quite literally. The idea here is an imperative to instruct Israel, listen to me. And that would be what it means, right? Listen up. And so literally it says, give me your ears. Now, no, in the Old English form, there would be such calls to say, people of the nation, lend me your ears. And this is that kind of an expression. Listen up. Give me your ear. Now, the call here are to two different parties as witness. O heavens, O earth. And the intent is to call upon two witnesses. And in the Bible, you will find even from Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And heavens and the earth are two, what we call, they are called permanent witnesses. No, the reason why they are called permanent witnesses is because the heavens and the earth will persist even if the Israelites do not. And that is the kind of the imagery here. And so that's the call on two parties to become eyewitnesses and to listen to what Moses has to say on behalf of God. And he says, I will speak and hear. So we have an A and a B, right? And it literally says the same thing. Just listen up. I will speak, and the words that come out of my mouth is what he is speaking. And so very clearly we have an A and a B. And this is an emphasis. Listen up, literally speaking, in a very Hebrew style of speaking. He says, let my teaching. Now, the word teaching here, I think it would be learning is a good word. Insight is also a good word. And this is Moses saying, and these are things that he is sharing from his heart. Now, the reason why chapter 32 is that important is because these are Moses' final words. As in all culture, I guess, the final words of a person is something to pay attention to. And so he is sharing with them my insight. And my insight would be insight of God, how he knows God, and whatever he is teaching, may it be like, may it drop, the word drop here, as the rain. And it's interesting, the word drop actually means to trickle down. To trickle down as rain. The idea here, to drip as rain. Okay. It says, let my teaching drop as the rain, my speech distill as the dew, as raindrops on tender herb, as showers on the grass. Now, what you have are four expressions, A, B, C, and D, and they are expressing the same concept. Let it be important, useful, helpful. And all of this is for growth. Because we're speaking about rain, dew, raindrops, and showers. And these are what we call rain is water from heaven. And as water from heaven, these are the source of life. And so that would be the more Hebrew way of looking at some of these words, how it drips down, drops down, trickle down, falling down, and on all the parts, it is describing the rain from very different viewpoints. It's all about the rain. And the rain from heaven becomes their source of life. So I would leave this to you to really mull over, because this is how the Hebrew expression gives itself. Now in verse 3, it says, for I proclaim the name of the Lord. Ascribe greatness to our God. Now this is probably some of the more familiar words that we know from songs that we sing. So let's break this down. For I proclaim, and the idea of proclaim here is to, I would say, cry out, or speak aloud. Right? I proclaim. And this is Moses. We're still talking about Moses. And Moses is describing what he is trying to express. Whatever he is trying to say, he is talking about the Shem of Jehovah. And as you know, the word name, right, is character. And he is now describing the character of God in the next many verses to give greatness to our God, our El, right? Our El. And this is mighty one. So understand this, that God doesn't really mean God in the Hebrew. God, or the word El, and in the plural Elohim, literally means the mighty one. And the idea of greatness here is really describes his power, his might. It describes his magnificence. So if you think of greatness of El, of God, there's many things that comes to mind, right? And that is what Moses is trying to say. At the end of his life, his whole life conclusion is God is incredibly great. And that is his personal engagement and insight of God. And so he is now trying to teach the insight, if you can see here, right? May my learnings and insight, and it's about God. Now, one more word I want to break down is this word, ascribe. Now, the word ascribe here is yahav. And so let me just put it down at the side here. Yahav. Yahav is to give, to ascribe. And this is very interesting because this is the idea of giving. And it shares the same root as ahav, which is love. And I've always told you that love means to give. And this is the base of the word. Yahav is to ascribe, to give to God. When you love another person, when you love God, when you ahav God, then you give yourself to God. And so the use of ahav and yahav is slightly different. But the base idea is always about giving. So to love God is to give. To love another person is to give. And that is the Hebrew concept. And so now we see another aspect of this word, ascribe, is yahav, which is a related word of ahav. So moving forward, this is about Moses describing God. Remember his insight of God. He is the rock. And you would find much of it in the Psalms because it's used as an imagery. He's a rock that cannot move. This would be like the cliff. That is a rock. Now, understand this. In that part of the world, and especially in Israel, the hills are rocky hills, which means that they are a piece of boulder, and the cliff are all rocks. And so when you look at a hill rising up in the horizon, they are all rocky. And so Moses is pointing perhaps to one of those. He says, he is the rock, and he doesn't move. He is dependable. And then he says, his work is perfect. And the work means the things that God does, right? Things he does. It is perfect. What do you mean by perfect? Now, in the English word, perfect means without flaw. It is very, very well, I should say very complete. And I think the word here is complete, right? It is flawless. Everything has been done that needs to be done. It is entire. It gives that kind of a connotation. So perfect is a good word. His work is perfect. It's complete. There's nothing lacking in his work. For all his ways are just. The Israelites are told to walk the way of God, and that would be direct. But it's all his ways, all the ways. The ways would be the manner of life, the instructions for living. And so life is a journey in the Hebrew sense. So that was why God brought them into the wilderness, to appreciate the understanding that life is a journey, and a journey that they must listen to the instructions of God. And by instructions of God, the word is Torah. That's instructions and directions. And his way is just. And we use the word justice, but basically it would mean just, right. It would mean that it would be the how should you say, the proper thing. And in Chinese, it's zheng, right? And so his ways are the right ways. His ways are the just ways. It doesn't go left, it doesn't go right. And in that path that he guides would be the perfect way. It says he is a God of truth. The idea here is he's the L of firmness, right? He's the L of steadfastness. The word truth here is emunah, and it literally means that you can depend on it, that it doesn't move, it is always faithful. And so that is what truth means in Hebrew, that it is well supported, it's not movable, it is steadfast, and hence the metaphor of the rock. And it is without injustice. This is a double negation. That's very interesting. And so if you take away the negation, it is with justice, which means that he is just. The injustice that the future Israelites will implement injustice against the people. And so injustice literally means violent deeds, and which we get eventually the word Hamas, that God is not that kind of a God. God has no injustice, and without means no. God has no injustice. God is not violent. God is not unrighteous. And so Moses then turns around and says that, and he is righteous. He is Sadiq. He is righteous. He is always right. And he is always upright. And of course, this is an A and a B, two words that describe the same thing. And so what you see right now in this passage in verse 4 is about the character of God that Moses has learned. And I guess it's also good for us to learn because this is the character of God. If we want to know God, and I've said that Deuteronomy is a book that describes who God is, well, chapter 32 is an incredible chapter that describes God and his dealings. Now, verse 5 says they, and this is somewhat prophetic, and this would be Israelites. The Israelites, on the other hand, have corrupted themselves. Now, the idea of corrupt is to, well, I think spoil would be a good word, right? Spoil, ruined. Now, how do you ruin yourselves? This is about a person. You are ruining yourselves when they do not deal rightly with the people, thereby perverting the laws of God. And that is what corrupt here literally means. They are not his children. Now, when it says they are not his children, it literally means they do not appear as his children. That is what it means. In literal sense, they are the children of God. But when the Israelites begin to corrupt themselves, in the eyes of God, they do not appear to be his children anymore. And by his children, you need to know that children is an English word. It will always be sons because of their blemish. Now, God is a perfect God, and blemish here means defect. It means there's a spot. You know, in sacrifices, when God wants an unblemished animal, means that there is no defect because you're offering a sacrifice to God. So you must bring a perfect animal. And so God expects expects his children to be perfect. To be perfect means to be without blemish. But now they have corrupted themselves. God does not see them as his children. And the reason is their blemish. And they are now being spoken of in future as a perverse and crooked generation. And this is where the phrase comes from, a perverse and crooked generation. Now, let me explain to you what that means. The word perverse is twisted, distorted. They distorted the laws of God, right? They don't look like the truth anymore. The second one is crooked, and both has similar meanings of crooked, but this one means crafty, right? Crafty, very much twisted as well, right? This is another word, generation. And so this is now speaking. Now I would say Moses is now prophesying, if you like to use that word, is speaking about a future time when the Israelites become corrupted, not looking like his children. They are defective against the law of God. They have made perverse and crooked, and this is an A and a B, right? This is an A and a B. And that generation, and that will be a generation in the future. And so Moses now talks about this. Do you thus deal with Jehovah? Now, what do you mean by deal? Deal is, well, I would say, is this how you repay God? Right? Is this how you repay God? And he says, oh, foolish and unwise people. Is speaking about that future generation, right? Foolish here literally means senseless. No logic. Unwise, literally unintelligent. And this is another A and a B. This generation, the crooked generation, is a foolish and unwise generation. And now Moses begins a very unusual description of God. And this is one of those rare occasions that Moses now say, isn't God your father? And this is the word father as Av. And the word father in Hebrew, right? Av, is the one who is the protector and provider of the family. Now that is the word father, Av. And in so doing, isn't God your father? And in this sense, he is a father who bought you. The word bought here has an idea of acquiring or even gathering. And so God is the one who has gathered them out of Egypt, right? Always remember, Egypt is that source. Has he not made you and established you? The idea of making is to form you, and establish here literally means to make sure. And this is an A and a B. And this is about a nation. Who made the nation? God. And so God is seen as a father because God is seen as one in the Hebrew sense, the protector and provider of the nation. And so God led them out of Egypt with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm, protected them, provided for them in the wilderness, and made them into a nation in Exodus chapter 19. That you are a holy nation, set apart, different from all nations of the world. And so this is how Moses sees the future, but Moses is still describing who God is. This is their God. This is Jehovah. If we know this God, this is what we should understand who God is. Verse 7, remember the days of old. Remember means to bring to mind, right? As always, bring to mind. The days of old. And you notice that these would be the days of Olam. And that's why I keep saying the word Olam doesn't mean eternity. It means a long, long time. And in this case, of the past. That's the context. The days that has passed from a long time ago that you need to consider. The word consider is to understand. The years of many generations. Do you see that this is an A and this is a B? It's about a long time ago. Now, if you don't remember, you need to ask your father and he will show you. Ask your elders and they will tell you. Again, notice this is an A and a B. So we are coming back to a very typical Hebrew style of expression. And this is Moses talking here, right? Moses talking here. It says, when the Most High divided their inheritance to the nations, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel. Now, need to understand this because verse 8 speaks about the time of Genesis. Genesis 6 to 11. So it says, remember, long time ago, when the Most High, this would be Elyon. And it's talking about God, right? It's a name for God. The name of God at that point in time says that he divided. The idea of divided is separated. Separated their land. The idea of inheritance or possessions is always with regards to the land, to the nations, the Goyim. And this might actually refer to the flood, right? Might refer to the flood, which led on to the dispersion, Babel. When he separated, the idea here is when he established when he divided there in there, when they divided, and this word separate also means divided. The sons of Adam, and this is humankind. And Moses is going all the way back to Genesis, where they were dispersed. He actually established. That's what set here means. The boundaries, the borders of the peoples. And by peoples here, this would be the peoples of the world. And if you recall in Genesis chapter 10 and 11, the table of nations, you would see how each of the families are divided up according to the number of the children of Israel. What do you mean by that? The word here is, the key word is according. According here would be because. That's the reason. The reason is about the children of Israel. You see, God distributed or dispersed all of them so that at the end of the day, the children of Israel may come to pass. And then you have in chapters 12 onwards, the calling of Abraham, then Isaac and Jacob. For the Lord's portion is his people. The idea of portion is share. Out of all the peoples of the world, his people will be that one that belongs to him. And who is this people? This would be Jacob, Yaakov. And Yaakov's name is Israel. Is the place of his inheritance, the heritage, the property, right? The property. Both of land and people. And so when you talk about Israel, we are not only looking at Israel as a people, a nation, but we're also looking at Israel as the land of God. And that is the way that Moses is now describing. You know, all of these, the story in the book of Genesis is described to the children of Israel so that they know that whatever you read in the book of Genesis is the origins of the story to explain why Israel came about, is what it means here. According to the number of the children of Israel. And all of these story is to bring forth Israel, because it of his inheritance. Both Moses sees God, and the entire, the laws that he wrote down, the first 5 books of Moses as is compiled together, tells the entire history of the origins of the nation of Israel. In verse 10, it says he found him. He found him. And this is interesting. The word him is now in the singular, and this is with regards to Israel, right? Israel. Or from the previous word, Yaakov. And this is God. And it says God attained, found him, or met him, right? In the wilderness. And the word wilderness is midbar. Midbar. And the word midbar is very interesting, right? It looks like this. And why it's interesting is because it is derived from the word davar. And this desert land, the wilderness, is really God's place, because it is a place where everything is in a balance. And so God met him in the wilderness, as in a wasteland, a howling wilderness, as if there was nothing there. That's what is being described, right? in terms of emptiness. We find this word, tohu, as in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2, and this would be empty. Because the wilderness has no people, it is empty. And when Israel was there, God encircled him, instructed him, kept him as the apple of his eye. There's a lot of good words here to learn. Verse 10, it says here, he encircled him. What do you mean encircled him? He surrounded him. Surrounding him is a form of protection, right? It's a form of protection. Instructing him. This word here is, it really is to, how should we say? It's to make them understand, right? Make them understand. So the word instruction is chosen by the translator. God made Jacob or Israel understand him. God kept. The word kept here is the word watch. Natsar. Natsar here would be to, well, I guess, protected him as the apple of his eye. Now, this word is an English idiom. I'm not sure why it was put in there, but let me break it down. The apple means the pupil, the black of his eye, right? And so this is a very literal word, right? The apple of his eye means the black of his eye. And God's eye really is the one watching Israel all this while. And God's presence is always presented as darkness. And the apple of his eye means the darkness of his eyes, the dark part of his eye, which also represents his very presence is there to keep and protect and surround and instruct, help them understand. And all of this is about a relationship with God. And this is a very intimate expression. How God personally came to deal with his people. And this is how Moses sees God. God is like a father to the children. The father, in the Hebrew sense, is one who protects and provides. God here is one who meets them in the wilderness. And that's very much the lesson that God wants the Israelites to learn. That in the wilderness is where God is guiding and teaching and showing them who God is. And so the book of Exodus and the book of Numbers really gives us a picture of how God deals with his people. And also, as an eagle stirs up its nest, hovers over its young, spreading its wings out, taking them out, carrying them on his wings. All of this is about how God protects, defends, and leads. And all of this is in the picture of an eagle. So God brought them out of Egypt on eagle's wings. And the idea here is the eagle is a ferocious attacker. And the eagle is the one that protects its nests, hovers over its young. And the word hovers also appears in Genesis 1 verse 2, and the Spirit of God hovered over the water. And so that's the word hovers. And so God portrays himself as an eagle who takes care of its young. And so the book of Genesis is very much describing the origins of his people, right? Of his people. And so the Lord let him alone. And this is a very interesting word. The word God alone is trying to show that God is Jehovah. Alone means he is the only El, right? Only mighty one that led him. Now, in the ancient Hebrew, there is always the picture of God. And so everybody has gods all over. And only Israel is told, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt, Exodus chapter 20. So Jehovah alone led Israel. There was no foreign God with him. What do you mean foreign God? Foreign God means an alien God, an alien El. There was no one else with him. So you need to know that in the picture of God, right? If you remember Deuteronomy 6:4, right? Yehovah Echad, the Lord is one. And that is always resounding. The Lord alone led Israel. There was no other gods with him. And so the God of Israel is Jehovah. This is the picture is being painting. And below him, there is nothing. Now, in the Greek sense, you have Zeus, right? And then there are different layers of gods, right? These are all deities. And this is not the picture here. So this could be Greek or this could be Egyptian. And this is not the picture that God is building. God is saying that there is nothing here. And only Jehovah is present. That is the imagery that is being described. He made him ride the heights of the earth that he might eat the produce of the fields. He made him draw honey from the rock and oil from the flinty rock. Now, these are all descriptions of the land of Israel. And so God, Jehovah, is the one that made him Jacob. And of course, that means Israel. To come to a land flowing with milk and honey. And these are all different ways of saying how rich the land is. Verse 14 continues, curds from the cattle, milk from the flock, fat of lambs. And by the way, curds, milk, and fat, they are all the same thing. Milk is actually fat, and fat of lambs, all this is richness. A land flowing with milk and honey. The rams of Bashan, goats, the choicest wheat. You drank wine, the blood of grapes. The word blood here is dam. And of grapes. The word grapes here, well, I guess the fruit itself. And you squeeze the juice out and the blood of the grapes will be wine, right? And this is an A and a B, talking about the same thing. This is richness. If you can enjoy life, and God is giving them the best of animals, right? The fattest. Bashan is the fattest of all. And so this really gives a picture of how caring God is, how he protected, and how he provided. And that would be the picture of a father in the Hebrew sense. Now in verse 15, this word is Yeshurun, right? Yeshurun. Yeshurun comes from the word yashar, is upright. And these are words that describes Israel. Grew fat and kicked. Very un-English, right? The word "and kicked" gives us a picture of, how should you say, to kick, to trample. The word fat here, be fat, he grew fat. Well, it literally means to be stubborn. I think stubborn is a metaphor for this. And here you get an A and a B. This is a character of Israel, from upright to stubborn. So you grew fat, you grew thick, you are obese. So the whole idea is fat, thick, and obese is all talking about the same idea of the character of Israel. And well, fat is fat, right? Grow fat, grow thick. And the idea grow thick is also like fat, dense, right? And the last one is obese. That's an English word. And the idea here is gorged with food. And so these are all three ways of talking about they've grown so fat that they have grown slow and then stubborn, right? And what happened is that after this, the idea here is they provoke God. I think this word here, instead of forsook, this word here should mean cast off, abandon, right? Abandon, I think is a good word. They abandoned God who made Israel. And then it says, and scornfully esteem the rock of his salvation. Scornfully esteem, well, how would you say? Senseless. This becomes senseless. Foolish. He foolishly dealt with God, the rock of his salvation. And in salvation is victory, deliverance. And this one, you can see it from Egypt and from all the battles that they have done. And the word rock here is the same. God is the rock. And so the word rock is used again to remind them that God is a cliff, faithful. And so the only one who is not faithful is Israel. God made Israel, and Israel abandoned God. They provoked him with jealousy, with foreign gods, with abominations. They provoked him to anger. Now, we've seen this in the book of Deuteronomy. Making God angry is provoked. Make angry. And why would God be angry? God is angry because he is a carnal God. And he says, you shall have no other gods before me. And what they have done is they have gone after foreign gods, alien gods, gods of the people of the land. And this is talking about the future, remember? It says, you would provoke God to jealousy and anger. Abominations will be all the things to do with idolatry. They provoked him to anger. So you can see that this is an A and a B. It's talking about how they made God angry because of idolatry. Now in verse 17, we find a word here called demons. Now the word demons, I think it's not quite the way it should be expressed in English. It comes from a word to spoil, right? To ruin. And so the idea of this word here is when they worship idols or the foreign gods, they slaughter animals or make sacrifice. They slaughtered animals to things that will bring them to their ruin. So remember, the perversion, the decay, the ruin is actually caused by idolatry. And so they are willing to sacrifice to those things that will bring them down. They are not sacrificing to God. Now, this word here, God, is another word. It's Eloha, right? Which also comes from the root word El. And it gives us another picture of God. And this is God that is the true God. And the false God is the name here. The word for demons is Sedim, right? Sedim. And that would be demon. Well, the word translated as demon, but not really in the way that we understand demons today. And so God says, to which they did not know. Now, the word did not know refers to the Sedim, and this always refers to idols, right? The El, they did not know. And God hates idolatry, right? They are called new. Interestingly, they are called new. And the word new is fresh. This is a fresh thing, something that which they have never done before, right? They did not know and knew, as well as this word, new arrivals. It's all in the same profile. So we have an A and a B. This is what they did not know. They are new gods. They did not know. And so we have the same aspect that your fathers did not fear. See, in the past, when it says their fathers did not fear, it literally means their fathers did not shiver. That's the word for fear. This is not the word yare. Their fathers did not fear them. They didn't care. And hence the word did not know. And so these are all expressing the same idea, that There will come a point in time later on in their future generations where they are called corrupt, and they will provoke God to jealousy because God says, I am your only God. I am Jehovah Echad. I am the God who brought you out of Egypt. I am a jealous God. I'm a Kana God. And this is all, again, prophesying how the future generation would then turn to gods that their fathers did not care about. And then those generations began to serve and worship and offer to Sedim, right? These are words of idols that they did not know. It is not to Elohah, it is to Sedim. Verse 18, of the rock who begot you. Now the word begot is literally the word bear, give birth. And so God gave birth to Israel. And so the idea of giving birth is the concept of bringing to life. So Israel is that son that God had begotten, right? And you are unmindful. What do you mean unmindful here? The idea here is forgetful. That's what unmindful means, right? You don't keep it in memory. You have forgotten the God who fathered you. And then this word fathered literally means how should you say, travail in pain, give birth. Then that's the picture. God gave birth to Israel. And so we have another A and a B. That they never keep in mind, they have forgotten the God who fathered you. And so this is still the picture of God the Father and Israel the Son. And hence, as we go along in the other books of the Bible, I think this would be a very important picture to keep in mind whenever we talk about father and son in relationship to this picture of God giving birth to Israel. Though they are a nation, they are in this particular metaphor treated as a son. They have forgotten the God who is their father. That's basically how it is expressed. Now, we have come to the end of time. We will stop here and we will continue tomorrow.